Thank you for inviting us, giving us the opportunity to talk today here to everyone. And I'm very happy to see some familiar names, Eric in the UK and Sue as well, and Nevin, who is now in Bolivia, in Belize. So thank you very much for supporting us. And so Nadia and I, one second, we have to rearrange that a little bit here. That's perfect. Nadia and I, as Kirsten said, would like to take you on a fast-forward 56-year journey of mountain gorilla conservation. It's a story about change, opportunities, challenges, and hope. But most importantly, it's a story written by countless passionate and dedicated people working together towards one goal, saving the gorillas and their habitat. It's a great pleasure, a great honor for us to be here today and represent this big conservation community. So this story brings us right to the heart of Africa, where three countries, Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda meet and form the Virunga Massif, which is a chain of 6 volcanoes with an elevational range from 2,000 to 4,500 meters. And it's the home of the mountain gorillas. So as you see on this map, maybe I can use the laser pointer. On this map, this is the Virunga Massif, and we have the volcano chain here. And we, the Fossey Fund, operates in Rwanda. But let's wind back to 1967. So here you see 3 courageous women who have written conservation history and have become really a role model for many generations to come, including Nadia and I, and probably many of you who are joining here today. Dian Fossey on the left side, Jane Goodall in the middle, and Virunga Galdikas. And they have also been referred to as Leakey angels. So Louis Leakey was an archaeologist who studied human evolution in Africa. And he believed that the study of existing great apes can provide indicators of the behavior of early extinct hominins. And he also believed that women should actually research wild great apes because they read social cues and observe the nature around them differently than men. So he recruited those 3 women to study the behavior of wild apes. Dian Fossey dedicated her life to the mountain gorillas, Jane Goodall to the chimpanzees, and Virunga Galdikas to the orangutans. And for Dian Fossey, really a dream became true when she went to Rwanda, because she fell in love with Africa on one of her earlier trips to the continent. And precisely on September the 24th in 1967, Diane started her mission and established the Karisimbi Research Center in the middle of 2 mountains, Karisimbi and Mount Bisoke. That's how also the name Karisimbi, she came up with that name, on the Rwandan side of the Virunga Massif. And here in the background of that picture, you see actually Mount Bisoke. And Dian Fossey was the first to habituate mountain gorillas by closely following them day by day. Through that close follow, she won the trust of these gorillas and showed once and for all the peaceful nature of gorillas, and very much unlike the myth of King Kong. She learned to observe individuals by drawing their nose prints because they are unique for each gorilla, like human fingerprints are unique for us. And she studied their behavior. So here on the slide, you see one of these nose prints she has been drawing. In 1977, Dian Fossey's favorite gorilla, Digit, was killed by poachers. And that was a time point where she realized much more needs to be done to save these gorillas. So Dian Fossey founded the Digit Fund in 1978 to finance and enforce anti-poaching patrols for preventing further poaching. Diane won further support for the Digit Fund through her articles in the National Geographic between 1970 and 1985. But the greatest publicity came when her book, Gorillas in the Mist, was published in 1983. Sadly, on December the 26th, so just after Christmas 1985, Dian Fossey was murdered in her cabin. She was buried next to her beloved digit in the gorilla graveyard next to her cabin. It's a place, if you come to Rwanda, and I encourage you strongly to do that, and some of you have been here, you can visit this area. It's one of the most beautiful forest areas, I would say. In 1988, the film version of Gorillas in the Mist was released by Universal Studios, and Sigourney Weaver played Dian Fossey. The film was a worldwide hit and arose more awareness of the mountain gorillas and their status. And today, Sigourney Weaver is still a great supporter of the Fossey Fund and an honorary chair on our board. And you may have wondered what happened after Dian Fossey died. So the organization she started continues on, being renamed in her honor, from the Digit Fund to the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. And the good news is, the mountain gorilla conservation community has been growing since, very large, and has reversed the population trends and negative trends through extreme conservation measures. As you can see on this slide, since the 1980s, we have seen a steady increase in the population from a low of less than 250 gorillas to over 600 in 2016 when the last census took place. And together with the second only mountain gorilla population found in the Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, which you can see on this map, northern from the Virunga Massif, and it's only located in Uganda. Today, we have over 1,000 mountain gorillas left in the world. As you can see here, this is a unique achievement in gorilla conservation, thanks to these extreme conservation measures. Because of those 4 subspecies that exist, and 2 of them are found in West Africa, the Western lowland gorillas and the Cross River gorillas, and 2 in East Africa, and one of them is the mountain gorilla, and also the Crowers gorillas, which you only find in Congo. Only the mountain gorillas are actually growing in number in the wild. And in fact, it's also unique in great ape conservation, because this is the only great ape subspecies that is growing in the wild. But not only the mountain gorilla population has been steadily growing, from a very small team of a handful of trackers, and Dian Fossey started, Karisimbi has been growing to a team of 174 staff in Rwanda, with 89% being Rwandan, including our director, Felix Najimana, which you see on this photo. The 2 of us, we started together in 2004, and I'm incredibly proud of him and his leadership. Sorry. And as you may have seen in the previous pictures, this is really, or seems to be, a male-dominated work. However, Fossey Fund is strongly committed to promoting gender equity. And we made this a mission, an integral part of our work. And let's be honest, Dian Fossey proved right from the start that women can lead the way for the gorillas. Today, 40% of our research assistants are women. But there's more growth and change to report. From a single tent facility, as you can see here, and Dian Fossey started and established the Karisimbi Research Center. The Fossey Fund's Karisimbi Research Center today operates from its first and new permanent home, the Ellen DeGeneres campus, based right on the foot of the Virunga Mountains. This campus serves a gateway to stakeholders in conservation, communities, and visitors from all over the world. It helps us upscale our efforts in creating the new generation of conservationist research and outreach. In 2022, this long-term dream became true to us, thanks to the very generous gift from the Ellen Fund, followed by many other donors. And this eco-friendly and purpose-built facility is composed of 3 main buildings, which I would like to show you briefly, because we are super proud of this. And I would like to share and invite you to visit us, and that's what you're going to find. So there's the Conservation Gallery, which is open to visitors. It hosts an interactive educational exhibit designed to tell the story of Dian Fossey, the mountain gorillas, their habitat, and our work. It also has a 360-degree theater, as well as augmented and virtual reality. And more than 25,000 people, including local community members, and over 5,500 school children visited our campus in 2022, which was the first year we opened. And we have free classroom and a cafeteria in our education center. In 2022, so the first year, we have trained over 300 students, and it served over 3,500, and we served over 3,500 meals to school children. And the third building is the research center. This is where we find our offices and 7 purpose-built labs, including a hormone and a genetic lab and the herbarium. Plus, the research center, and that's we're very proud of as well, hosts the largest gorilla skeletal collection, including over 180 specimens. The Mountain Gorilla Skeletal Project is a large collaborative effort with our partners, including the Rwanda Development Board, the Institute of National Museum of Rwanda, George Washington University, and the Gorilla Doctors. And as you can see on the photo, already Dian Fossey realized the great value and source of information the remains of the gorillas can provide us. We can still learn a lot about their health and their lives after their death. And we can compare skeletal aging with modern humans and learn more about our evolution. And as you can see on the other photo on the right side, the collection also serves the training of a new generation of conservationists. And finally, the 3 campus buildings I just introduced are surrounded by educational trails, which we use as living laboratories, where more than 250,000 native plants, which you find in the national park, grow and are also monitored by us. And I have no picture of that, but we also have housing where 33 students can stay overnight and do their studies. But let's go to our next point of change. Over the past decades, our conservation approach also has changed. While the first 2 pillars you see here mirror what Dian Fossey has been implemented and we continue to do, so protection of the gorilla population and their habitat, science research on gorillas and the surrounding biodiversity. And the other 2 pillars were added in the early 2000s, so leading to a more integrated conservation approach, with training of the next generation of African conservationists, helping communities through education, outreach, health initiatives, and addressing basic needs. And I would like to go through these 4 pillars in more depth with you. So, protection. Our protection integrates Dian's legacy of boots on the ground. We protect half of Rwanda's mountain gorillas, 365 days a year, no matter what the weather conditions are and if it's Christmas or not. And we conduct regular anti-poaching teams, patrols to remove snares, because those are still remaining threats to the gorillas today. As you can see on this photo, what Dian Fossey has been doing already back in the old times, we still do. And like Dian Fossey did, we continue research by collecting long-term gorilla data, including demography, behavior, ranging data, health, and development data. However, as you can see on those photos, we have actually changed the way how we collect these data. So instead of using pencil and paper like Dian Fossey, today we use electronic devices with softwares designed for monitoring specific data. And we also have implemented a lot of advanced techniques, such as fecal hormone analysis. And for example, we can collect these fecal samples from individual known gorillas when our teams are in the forest and our researchers. And from those, we can measure different hormone levels, such as cortisol, which indicates stress, or thyroid, which indicates the energy balance of the gorilla. And since 2011, we have collected and analyzed over 16,000 samples, which allow us to identify key stressors for these gorillas. And thanks to our new campus, we can now conduct all lab analysis in country. So let me now hand over to Nadia, who will introduce you to another very cool new technique she has been using over the past 5 years. Nadia, it's yours.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Winnie. This technique called parallel laser photogrammetry allows us to non-invasively measure and monitor the body size of wild mountain gorillas. You might be wondering why study the body growth and individual differences in this great app. It's interesting because mountain gorillas exhibit the highest body size difference between male and female when we compare that to other great apes like bonobos, chimpanzees, and orangutans. And unlike the theory that predicts that the bigger the body size, the longer it takes for the individuals to reach sexual maturity, female mountain gorillas reach sexual maturity at quite an early age, given their larger body size. And as you can see on the photo on the left, we have modified the camera and attached it to surgical lasers that are safe on the gorilla body, and they're green, given that gorillas are a habitat is dominated by the green color. So we are confident that this technique is not disturbing them in any way. And we know the distance between lasers, which function as a reference and help us predict their body growth. And you can see that from the photo on the right, like the body part of interest. And this is how it looks like in the forest. From a safe distance of at least 7 meters, I project the lasers on the body part of interest when the gorilla is in the right position. And back at the office, I download the photos, extrapolate the body size on the computer using those laser marks as a reference point. One of the questions we wanted to look at was how male reach a larger body size compared to female. We were wondering whether they grow faster than females or they grow longer. And we found that males and females grow at the same pace until they reach an average of 8.5 years. And then females, which you see in the red color, their growth velocity slows and ceases on an average of 9.9 years, while males that you see in blue keep growing until they reach an average of 14.5. Interestingly, the stop of growth in female coincide with the average age where female give birth for the first time. And for males, they reach their full body size at that age, and that's when they leave their native group to become solitary male and try to establish their own group. I will hand back over to Winnie.
Thanks, Nadia. All right, let's move on. So overall, our science program has produced over 450 science publications today. And really most what we know about gorillas today stems from the Karisimbi research population. And we are often asked if research is still, why is research still needed after over 50 years time? And I would like to give you one example showing that like the human population constantly changes and faces new challenges, so the gorilla population undergoes changes that brings also new challenges, despite its growth, which is like a beautiful news, right? So on this map, you see the area of the Virunga, and I tried to take my pointer laser. So you see here the Volcanoes National Park. This is where we are operating. And the research population is located here. This is the red area. This is where the population ranges we study over 55 years. Right. So between 2006 and 2009, we observed a complete social reorganization of the research population, which I would like to visualize through a short animation showing the ranging pattern of social groups we study. Let's hope it works. All right. For nearly 15 years, we followed 3 stable groups, Beats, Mishinda, and Pablo, that grew very large in size, up to 65 individuals in one group. When their leaders became older, the young males in the group started challenging the leader for its position. And this brought a lot of instability in these 3 groups. And that initiated a series of group splits and formation of new groups, which you can see here. So each color represents another group. And you see that in the same area, although the number of individuals actually did not change much, the number of groups in the same area exploded, technically. It's almost like for a gorilla coming from a village into a small town or in a bigger town. And this has consequences. Okay, let's stop this. Yeah, so there are cascading effects, and those come with new challenges. such as the number of social groups has tripled within only 2 years. And with that, we saw an increase in home range overlap between social groups. And that has the consequence that these groups actually, while they're ranging, they bounce into each other more often. They encounter each other more often. So we have 3 times as many interactions between these groups we observed. And each interaction can pose a lot of risk to the males to get injured lethally, and also to the infants. They could become victim of infanticide, which is when one male of one group is killing the offspring, the infant of infant in the other group. And that rate has also increased 4.5-fold. And as I mentioned, also lethal male-male aggressions increased. And those interactions are also always an opportunity for females to change the group, so to transfer to a new group, and that has led to a larger interbirth interval of those females who transfer. And the sum of this actually has led to a slowing of the population, of the growth rates of this study population. So it's still growing in numbers, but it has slowed down. It doesn't grow as fast anymore as in the past. So these social factors we have observed reduce the growth rates of this research population. I would also like to introduce you to another change. In 2019, so very recently, we expanded our research efforts from the historical side. And again, let me remind you where this is with the cursor here. To the upper forest area in the eastern region of the park to build a more comprehensive understanding of mountain gorilla ecology. So we have been expanding to groups which are ranging in this area of the Volcanoes National Park. As you can see from the map, in the eastern region, gorilla groups actually use quite a different composition of vegetation types. And we need to understand better the dietary variability among these groups across the park, which may also help to explain actually differences we have observed in gorilla density and growth in the previous gorilla censuses. So in the east, we have seen a lower group density and also a slower population growth compared to the area where the historical research population is ranging. So what did we find? The initial 4 years of research expansion have demonstrated that these groups in the east actually prefer very different key foods. So it's very different what they find in this area than what gorillas find in the historical area where we study them for over 50 years. So that shows us that we just start to understand the full dietary flexibility of these gorillas. And it also shows us that with this research expansion, we really open a new chapter of gorilla research, a new exciting chapter of gorilla research. And compared to the earlier times, the Fossey Fund has also expanded its scientific research and monitoring programs beyond gorillas, using a more holistic approach. Because mountain gorillas are not alone in the forest, and their forest is part of one of Africa's biodiversity hotspots, the Albertine Rift. So to better understand mountain gorilla ecosystems as a whole, we have started actively monitoring and studying many other animals and plants, including other mammals, such as the golden monkeys. You can see on the upper picture, it's the other only primate living in the alongside with mountain gorillas. Bamboo shoot regeneration, it's a key food for both of these primates, the mountain gorillas and the golden monkeys, and we see a little decline actually in regeneration. Amphibians, wetlands, and invertebrates that are good indicators of the overall ecosystem health, and common birds, which are a reliable sign of the overall biodiversity. I'd like to share one of our most recent findings from the biodiversity program. On this picture, you see Claude. He's one of our research assistants who currently pursues a master in Germany. And his team, they estimated that the elephants and tiger population are slightly increasing, while the densities of buffaloes and bushbok increased substantially between 2008 and 2008 and 2021. And this finding suggests that large mammals are also on the recovery from a steep decline and possibly benefit from the mountain gorilla protection. All right, pillar number 3. Training the next generation of African conservationists has become a crucial part of our conservation approach. And Nadia and I are very passionate about that pillar. Each year, we host hundreds of undergraduate and graduate students and early career professionals on our campus for specialized training, internships that aim to strengthen their skill set. And here on this picture, you see Deo. He was one of our first bachelor students who did his research project with us. And he was hired after in 2005. And today he is training students. He became a role model for Rwandan biology students. And they are very eager to follow his footsteps, and we are very proud of him. And he just actually finished his PhD work. He's Dr. Deo now. And our program provides classrooms and hands-on training in areas such as conservation biology, research methods, lab techniques, and scientific writing. And here I would like to point at Laban Kaitete in the middle of the photo. He was the first bachelor student to publish his research outcomes that he conducted with us during the MEMORA program. The MEMORA program is a collaborative capacity strengthening approach that channels the strength of existing national and international partners, which you can see here. And it aims to address the urgent need for scientific capacity strengthening in critical fields of conservation, targeting the bachelor students of Rwanda. And just to give you an overview, since 2003, we reached 155 students, and 83% of the students engaged in fields of conservation through postgraduate programs and employment in East Africa. And today, over 9 publications resulted from these projects, which are led by those students. The program really became an in-country pipeline for young Rwandans to grow passion and ownership for conserving the region's biodiversity and become tomorrow's conservation leaders. And now I'd like to hand back over to Nadia, who's going to talk about our 4th pillar, helping communities.
Thanks, Winnie. We know that for conservation to be successful, it must also address the need of the human communities who live around gorillas' forest home. And that's why our motto is helping people, saving gorillas. So our community engagement programs focus on addressing those communities' needs through food and water security, provision, education, livelihood development. And by improving people's lives, and that we strongly believe that this will lessen their dependence on the forest where the gorillas live. One of our exciting projects is the mushroom cultivation, which is supported by the IUCN Save Our Species Protection Grant, co-funded by the European Union. It involves 40 families living at the Volcano National Park and address all our community engagement strategies at once, namely the food security, the livelihoods, and education. And beyond that, the profit from those mushrooms are reinvested, for example, into purchasing sheep for our members. This initiative not only contributes to poverty reduction, but also supplies organic fertilizers for their crops. Another initiative we implemented this year and that I'm particularly passionate about is girls and conservation. I'm going to tell you a bit of a background that led to this initiative. Research shows that girls and women suffer disproportionately from climate change, and limited access to education worsens this problem. Also, research shows that they could make a disproportionately positive contribution to the solutions if given power and a voice. Focusing on Rwanda, the latest Rwanda Demographic Health Survey revealed that only 39% of girls attend secondary school, and that girls attend school irregularly and they drop out after primary school. With that, through the Girls in Conservation, we aim to address these inequalities holistically while promoting careers in conservation. This program, it targets aspiring female students in secondary school around the gorilla habitat. We provide them with life skills lessons, such as networking, budgeting, computer literacy, a mentor who is a female professional, and a scholarship that help them attain their secondary school education. And the goal is to increase their school attendance and education attainment. Handing back to Winnie so she can expand on what we also do in Congo.
Mm-hmm. All right, so before we end our journey, I would really like to briefly talk about another significant expansion of our work. The Fossey Fund began working in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo in 2002 to expand the protection, monitoring, and the research to the critically endangered Karisimbi gorillas and their habitat. And unlike the mountain gorillas, their numbers are rapidly declining. So more than 60% have been lost primarily due to poaching in the last few decades. So it's very alarming. And in addition, a large proportion of the Karisimbi gorillas live in unprotected areas, in unprotected forests. So therefore, their survival really depends on how we engage local communities in conservation efforts. And here I've added as a slide, which will show a little bit, put this bit more in perspective what we are doing there. So in 2011, in collaboration with local communities and led by Oban Gubobo, which you see on this photo, we established an Nkupa conservation area in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And on the map, you see that today, the actual area which we protect there is much bigger than the area we walk in the Volcanoes National Park. In fact, this community protected forest includes more than 2,400 square kilometers, which is an area 6 times the size of the entire Virunga Massif, and is a model for community managed forests. And survey efforts we have done over these years since 2011 suggest that this area is home to over 500 Karisimbi gorillas and also chimpanzees, as well as other endangered and important species. And this year, we're very proud the work of Oban and his tracker team hired from the local communities has been acknowledged for their efforts by the Disney Conservation Fund, which recently named them as Disney Conservation Heroes for the risk they take, the courage they show, and their contribution to an inspiring global story of hope for the future. And conservation doesn't happen in isolation, as you know. It takes us all to save gorillas. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. In that sense, I would really like to thank all our conservation partners, which are listed here, the many donors, which are countless. I cannot put them all on that slide, and all the past and current staff from Fossey Fund. And please connect with us over our social media. We're very active there. There is also the website, and feel free also to connect directly with Nadia or with me. And thank you very much for listening and for supporting us and for your interest in our work. And we are happy to try to answer any questions you may have for us.
Yeah. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much to both of you for an incredible presentation. First of all, we just want to applaud your work. It is incredible to see how your organization grew from a start in a tent to now this beautiful campus that you have and all the support that you gathered. That is amazing to see how you did the slow walk and you had all this group that gathered around you, and how your staff grew through to this large component, also the research component and the community service that you do, these 4 very strong pillars. And now you're even doing work across the Rwandan borders. So congratulations on a fantastic project. May the next 50 years be even better. Thank you so much, everybody. So now, as always, it is time for questions. We only have them for a little bit longer, so please fire away. We're keen for you to have time to ask questions. So, but they also need to be transferred home. So it would be great if you can start asking your questions, either use the reaction tools at the bottom of the screen or ask your questions in the chat. And I already see a question in the chat from Fran Gebhardt. I visited a gorilla family in Burundi 17 years ago. I'm wondering whether the family groups where they traverse in the border freely, or is the border between Uganda and Rwanda at that spot a barrier?
Thank you for sharing your experience here in the region. And it sounds like to me that you have been in the second mountain gorilla population, which is only found in Uganda. So the Bwindi Impenetrable National Park is about 25 kilometers away from the Virunga Massif. And it's pretty much almost 100% in Uganda. And just a tiny little part is in Congo. So, but we operate in the other population, where Dian Fossey started to establish the Karisimbi Research Center, which is the Virunga mountain gorilla population. So there are two populations which are very close, but they cannot exchange between each other because there's agricultural land and a very, very high human density that separates those two populations. But in Rwanda, where the mountain gorillas, the habitat covers 3 countries, the Congo, Uganda, and Rwanda, they can freely move between those 3 countries. There's not a border which a fence or so that keeps them from exchanging between these countries. That's a good question. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Then from Penelope Brown, thank you, very interesting. Just wondering if you are doing work in invasive alien species and how much of a problem there are there?
Invasive alien species, you mean?
Yes,
sorry,
yeah? Such as invasive plants, for instance.
Okay. Thank you. That is definitely an area where we are part of. It's part of our ranger-based monitoring, which we do daily on all groups when teams go in the forest. If we see invasive species, we take a GPS coordinate and report this to the Rwanda Development Board, to the park management, and they have regular teams which go to the spot back and remove these plants. So that's how we try to minimize invasion of invasive species. But I don't know, Nadia, if you're aware of any serious invasion. I think not really. Yeah. So that is quite, there's certainly more research that could be done to track more the changes over time. And we can make also suggestions about that. It's a good point. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. It is also good to hear that you have a good, efficient system in place to deal with that. Andrew Mariti, please unmute. You're welcome to ask your question.
Okay, thanks, Johan. Nadia, apparently what caused Dian Fossey's death was poaching. Do you think there's poaching even now, or what? Has it stopped, or has the development board stopped it? What's happening?
Thank you very much for your question. We still are conducting active anti-poaching patrol, and we are somehow delighted not to have recorded animals being caught in snares in the Rwandan side. But however, the anti-poaching is doing a tremendous work of removing snares that are actually set for other antelopes. And we believe that as Dian Fossey saw, it was crucial for gorillas to thrive. That is still the reality on the ground at the current moment. And I'm happy if Winnie could add more detail on that.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks, Nadia. Yeah, no, Nadia captured it pretty well. So it's a remaining threat. Snares are still set. Gorillas are not poached themselves, so they don't target the gorillas. They are not their target. And that really hasn't happened over many decades in the Virunga population. It's still the case in the other eastern species of gorillas, in Grau's gorillas. They're still poached directly. But what we see here is there are still snares set in the forest, which are targeting antelopes and buffaloes. But gorillas can also step into those snares. But thanks to the daily monitoring and pretty much the large majority of the gorillas here on the Rwanda side are actually habituated to humans. So we can give them daily protection and see very early on if a gorilla is in a snare. And then we can contact our partners, the gorilla doctors, to come and remove the snare. Sometimes the gorillas manage to get it off themselves, but if not, we have to intervene and with our partners, the gorilla doctors, to remove the snare.
Okay, the other point, question for myself is, I see in your schools or what can I say now, in efforts that you are doing to get communities involved and interested as well in gorillas, but I don't see white faces there. Are you mixing up the people that you are teaching students or what?
Oh, our community engagement outreach has the education part where we work with students in schools that are around the Volcano National Park, but also the community, because it's a collective effort. After the day, the student have to go home, and the people who are active, like I would say professionally active around the park, need to be like engaged. So everything we do is more of educating them, also providing them those skills, supporting them financially, but also teaching them how to sustainably use their finances to actually benefit their families, but also the broader community, like our mushroom project, where those families actually not only get a source of food, but they also sell those mushrooms, which also help the community get access to that source of food, and also they gain income, which they invest in other things, like for example the rearing of the small animals, like the covering the health insurance, and also they also get the organic fertilizer, which are conservation friendly. It's more of a cycle.
And everything is targeting, or the goal is that people depend less on forest resources. So for example, mushrooms are really high in protein, so it is a nice substitute for meat. Instead of going hunting, you can also gain a lot of proteins from mushrooms, and it's an additional income source. So we hope that with the projects we implement, that we reduce the dependence on the forest, different resources. So it always goes back. We try to really touch changes in the gorilla protection, and that we see a change also in the forest with the projects we do outside.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Andrew, if it's okay with you, let me just move on a little bit, because I'm just scared that I can't cover everybody's questions. There's a queue, but if there's time, I will come back to you, if that's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I just want to go back to the chat quickly. Sophia, what is the lifespan of a gorilla? Apart from poaching, what are the other threats to the gorillas?
That's a very good question. We know that on average, they can live up to 39 years old.
35?
Yeah, on average.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you want to talk about threats? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question. So there are other remaining threats. So for example, also disease transmission. We all have been going through a pandemic some years ago. And because we're so closely related to these mountain gorillas. There's a risk of disease transmission from humans to gorillas, but also from livestock outside to gorillas. Gorillas come outside the park where they very closely interact with humans. And yeah, so that's one big threat. But also climate change, we have to keep an eye on. Also, we know that primates can be quite robust and flexible and adapt to climate change. But these are mountain gorillas. So they're already on the tip of these mountains because of the forest that has been cut down. They have been pushed to their extremes, to high elevation. So there's nowhere to go if it gets hotter. Where are they going? And so those are some of the main threats. And as I have said before, it's not a threat, but it's a limitation we are having. Because of the success, the population has been growing, but the habitat has not been growing. So the Rwandan government is exploring the possibility to expand or let's say to restore the park that has been cut down to 50% in the 1950s to 1960s, to give them some more space again.
That's indeed good news. Let's hope that happens. Just another question from the chat, Marty and Emlyn, before I turn to you. Prof. William Bond, welcome. He's one of our previous speakers. The gorillas don't seem to use forests, but rather more open, scrubby habitat. Is that correct?
And I would say that the structure of the mountain, the Afro-montane forest where the mountain gorillas here live is indeed a bit different. I remember when I came the first time to Rwanda, and the tropical forest I have been before, it's a closed canopy, forest canopy, but the habitat of the mountain gorillas is actually not a closed, there are not so many trees. They're not the classical fruiting trees. That's also why they mostly are actually feeding on herbs and not on fruits. Also there, the mountain gorillas here and the Virungas are on extreme end. And there's a lot of dense underground vegetation, and they mostly rely on these herbaceous vegetation for food. And it's quite an open forest. And the higher you go, the less trees you have. That's a rule you find all over the place on the globe. And they go a bit up to the subalpine and alpine zones where you have really only shrubs left and rubus a bit and just some herbs. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope I understood that correctly. But please tell us if not.
Thanks, Winnie. Prof. Bond, if you need to follow up, please do so. Marty, if you don't mind, I'm quickly going to go to Emlyn and then we're going to come back to you. Emlyn, please unmute. You're welcome to ask your question.
Thank you, Johan. My question is that, mindful that it took a long time for both Dian Fossey and for Jane Goodall to establish the first social contact with a chimpanzee and a gorilla, is there any evidence that decades of human contact and human observation have changed the behavior of these very sentient animals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. It's quite difficult to study. Maybe one could, because if we would study them without our presence, we would need camera traps, or it's going to be hard to really have a control data for this. I think maybe what has been changed over time, we see that gorillas come a bit more out of the park because they're familiar with humans. They're not scared of them. And maybe also because the population has been growing inside the park, that it's sometimes a way to gain more space and to avoid each other, to not have interactions. But otherwise, the only difference really, and it's rather speaking for the daily protection by humans, for the presence of humans, is that these habituated gorilla groups, they are actually the one who made up the most percentage of population growth we have been seeing over all these decades. While the unhabituated, unmonitored groups are not growing. They may even be in a decline. There's always a confidence interval, which can be quite large, but there's no proof that they are growing. So all the population growth goes back to these groups which are daily protected because of the protection we can give them and the care and it's a successful strategy for this population here in the Virungas.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're muted, Johan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Marty, please go ahead and ask your question.
Cool, guys. Thanks. Unfortunately, I missed the beginning of the talk, so I really hope you didn't cover this in the talk already. But I'm just interested. I mean, the location is literally between DRC and Rwanda and Uganda on the other side, and I'm trying to understand the range of a particular one gorilla. Does he cross the border, and as a family cross the border? What is the sort of movement range? And do you actually have trackers on any particular individual's data trackers, so you can see where they actually move of that whole area, how much one will move? Because I think you may be able to identify individuals with your monitors and that, but yeah, do you have that kind of data and information available of how they move from one country to the next country?
Natya, do you want to answer the first part of the question? I can take on the second. The first one, if I recap, the first question was whether what is the movement across these countries? How do gorillas move between these different national parks? So each country has a different national park, but of course it's a combined, it's a connected forest, right? So. Yeah. It's similar to the question what we had in the very beginning, but Nadia, maybe.
Yeah, in terms of moving, as Winnie mentioned it briefly, that there's no border in the Virunga Massif, so gorillas do cross. And there's this group in particular, Mafunzo, that was quite fascinating. Most of the time, it will like range back and forth, like it will come on the Rwandan side, we'll monitor it, and some days it will be like pulling rain, and then the group just decides to like move, and then we have to follow it. And when they cross the border, we're like, okay, goodbye guys, see you when you decide to come back. So they do, and they often move to forage, and given that the area they mostly eat herbaceous vegetation, which is abundant throughout, they don't move quite a long distance. On average, it will be like 1 kilometer. So yeah.
Okay, no, yeah, that's sort of what I was wanting to understand. You know, in moving across the border, you guys can't follow them. Is there another group waiting on the other side who can also monitor and follow them? And then kind of, you know, what is the sort of furthest range that they go? 10 Ks in a day, or 20 Ks, or 50 Ks, or?
Yeah. It always depends a bit on the situation. So in the past, we could go into Congo a little bit. These days, it's not possible. But another way how we can actually track what happens with these gorillas, where they are going, if we never see them again, because some groups go over, most of them now and then they come back and we see them. But others, we know they interacted with an unmonitored group, but we don't know what happens with them. But every 5 to 7 years, 6 years, when we do a gorilla census, where we take fecal samples from the nest sites of each group, which we detect through walking recce through the forest, we basically brush the whole forest. Through these fecal samples, we can check which individuals in which group and where are they ranging now. And in fact, the last census, we found some of the females, which were for many years in some of our groups, we monitored for a long time, and they are now in the groups on the DRC side. So we know they're alive, we know in which group they are and where they are ranging. So it's a very intense effort, the census, but it allows us sometimes to get a snapshot who is still around and where are they now.
And are they doing the same fecals, brushing, I think was the word, or combing on all sides of the borders?
Yeah, it's a collective effort from all countries. That's really when all 3 countries come together. And in fact, those teams which walk at the same time through the forest over a month, they are composed of trackers from the 3 countries, from Rwanda, Uganda, and Congo. And it's a very bonding time, and a once a life experience for these people who have done it before. They will never forget it. It's extremely challenging to walk through this high elevation forest and through the mist and the rain, but it's also an incredibly nice experience to do this together and really walk together hand in hand to assess how successful are we with our conservation efforts. And it's bonding time between those people who walk in the park. And they're all very good friends, actually. They know each other, they stay in touch.
And are there any radio trackers on any of them? Or that was sort of just the other parts?
That's a good question. We have our boots on the ground 365 days a year, like every day, as Winnie mentioned, on Christmas, on holidays, every time. So we take GPS coordinate, and then when we analyze them, that's when we can actually know which home range given groups uses, so we don't tag them.
It's very invasive. It really, and those they don't really last for a very long time. So because of the nature of that procedure, we don't do that. And for these groups that are habituated, it's very easy to follow them. We rarely lose them, because as we discussed early on, it's very dense underground vegetation, and these great apes move most of the time on the ground, and they leave quite a clear trail for us to track. And it's also like different to chimpanzee studies, where you have to be in the morning when they leave their nest, and you cannot leave earlier before they build their nest again. It's not what we are doing. So we in the morning we track them, and very rarely we still find them in the nest, and that's only the odd day when it is very rainy outside and they just don't want to leave their nest. But most of the time they have been moving on, and we follow the trails. So it's really, there are some exceptions, like these solitary males, which leave their native group. That would be sometimes cool to know where are they going, what's happening. It's still a lot of secret life about these solitary males. They pop up sometimes, we see them, they interact with groups, neighboring groups. They want to get females out of groups and form their own group. So that would be cool, but I think it's because of the invasive nature of that technique, not an option.
No, perfect. I'll leave it now. I was just wondering, the human beings with criminals, they put those little things on their ankles and they actually radio track them, and maybe that technology might be available, but I'll stop now. Cool, thanks.
Thank you for the comment, yeah.
Winnie and Nadia, I know that you need to go, so I'm going to take one more question. I apologize to everybody whose questions we couldn't take tonight, but this is unfortunately going to be the last one. I'm going to give preference to Selo Maluleka simply because he's a student. So the last question will come from the youth. Thank you for the talk. My question is, how do you deal with human-wildlife conflict, and what measures are taken to try to mitigate the problem?
Thank you. Nadia, do you want to go ahead?
That's quite a broad.
Yeah, maybe let me start, and you can add something. So what we do, we are doing research, and monitoring and protection. So we help the park management to monitor when gorillas come out. We collect data about it and provide it to the park management, and they then find systems to recompensate the communities outside. So for example, in case of the mountain gorillas, it's actually quite easy. So what gorillas do when they come out of the park, the biggest damage they leave, they're not really the biggest problems in human-wildlife conflicts. The problem are really the buffaloes. But when gorillas come out, what they do is they harm the eucalyptus trees, which people plant outside for construction, for firewood, for charcoal, and they peel off the bark and eat the sap. And there's a lot of sodium in there, so they quite like that stuff. And then they eat herbs which they find outside, sometimes also bamboo stems which are growing outside. People use that for building as well, and they sell it. It's an income, but that's easy to report. So those damage of gorillas, it's easier to then report to the government, to the the system that is in place, and you will be compensated. And it's a bit more tricky with the golden monkeys, for example, which is the second primate. You may remember the photo we have shown. They come out of the forest and they developed a taste for potatoes. And that is a problem. That's not so easy to report. And we have one of our colleagues, in fact, he joined the presentation as one of the listeners. Eric, maybe you want to say something to it. He dedicated his master research to golden monkey human conflict. And we had a workshop where we reviewed with all stakeholders, communities, with researchers, with communities, with a very broad community, what is working, what measures might be the most effective, where can we do better. We just reviewed that with them and came up with recommendations how to move forward. Eric, I don't know if you're still there, if you want to say something to it.
Eric, we've asked you to unmute. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Winnie. Yeah, good.
You're on the spot.
Greetings from Nottingham. Yeah. As Winnie said, we organized a conference with the park management, and we shared the ideas about what is the issue around the golden monkeys. And it's really an issue, as Winnie says. They come outside the park, they grab potatoes. But as also Winnie said, there are measures to try to mitigate those. I mean, farmers are trying to chase them back when they come. And also the government is trying to do a compensation, as Winnie said, not for the monkeys, but for the big animals. But also there is a revenue sharing. I mean, the government puts some money in the community. You know, you lose your potatoes, but at the end of the day, the money that goes to visit gorillas and the other animals of the park comes back to you in schools, in roads, and what else. Kind of. So it's a complex issue, but the government is doing its best to try to offset what the people are losing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Nadia and Winnie, thank you so much. If you don't have anything else that you want to add, we're going to thank you. We know you have a driver waiting to transfer you home. I apologize to everybody whose questions we couldn't take, but we'll ask them back in the future. So please
feel free to reach out. And if you have any burning questions you would like to have answered. And thank you so much for joining us. I don't know if anybody joins from the US who's probably eager to go to the Turkey now. It's Thanksgiving today, and for some it's also very late. So thank you for joining us and for your interest and for your very good questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, and we're very happy to provide you with clarifications. And you can follow us on our socials. We're very active there, and you will be amazed about like those funny faces of gorillas and dominant male trying to be dominant. And we are very happy to actually share all about that.
And of course, if you don't know what you do in your next holiday, Rwanda is a great country to visit, and the campus is open for visitors. So maybe we meet in person at some point here. That would be great too. Yeah. Then you give us a shout when you're around. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Also, welcome to, it's late to say welcome, but we acknowledge the previous primate speakers that joined us this evening. Iris Ho from PASA. Also saw Prof. Mugisha from University Makerere in Uganda. It was great to have all of you with us. Have a great evening. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.